Hello and welcome to today's episode of A Slice of Medieval. Joining us today is a chap who seems to enjoy writing about my favourite legends. He did a fabulous series on Robin Hood, and now he's tackling the story of King Arthur in an interesting way because he's doing it in parts as a serial book. So welcome to A Slice of Medieval for your second visit as well, isn't it, Angus?
It is, yes.
It's Angus Donald. Welcome, Angus.
Oh, thank you very much, Sharon, for inviting me. It's very nice to come back on the show again, and I'm looking forward to telling you all about my new King Arthur project. You were saying rightly that it's episodes, so I was wondering if you'd like me to explain a little bit more about that.
I would. What made you decide to write? I don't think I put that in my questions, but I did wonder what made you decide to write it in episodes. And when is episode 4 coming out?
I'll get to that in a second. Basically, the story is quite a sort of weird story. Well, not that weird. About 10 or 12 years ago, I thought about doing a King Arthur thing. I think I was still writing Robin Hood books, the Outlaw Chronicles, and I thought it might be quite nice to do the other great English hero or British hero, which is King Arthur. For me, they seem a sort of like a pair. Robin Hood and King Arthur. I don't think there's anyone else who comes. I mean, Herod with the Wake, obviously, but I don't think there's anyone of the same stature as Robin Hood and King Arthur. So I think it was 12 years ago, it's quite a long time ago, I wrote a few chapters of a King Arthur story, and it was kind of basically just an experiment. And it was very heavily influenced by Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles, which I loved. I read them when I was sort of in my 20s, and I absolutely love them, and they've been very influential on a lot of my writing. I think I last read them about 30 years ago, but they're still so sort of strong in my memory that when I started writing this King Arthur thing, it sort of instinctively became set in more or less the same world as Bernard Cornwell's one. The post-Roman vacuum of power, where you've got the Saxons, Anglo-Saxons coming in, and you've got the crumbling of the Roman structures, and it's a time of chaos, and it seemed a very good time to set a King Arthur story. So basically I sort of said, yes, let's set it in that time. It's also actually when most people think that King Arthur, if he existed, would probably have been operating. You have various records. I mean, not records of King Arthur, but they talk about a warlord, Brett Wilder, and various things like that who existed at this time. So that's what I started writing it, and I wrote about 4 or 5 chapters, and I put it down because I then had to go and do something else. I can't even remember. It was 12 years ago. I can't even remember what it was that I put it down to go and do. I put it down and I forgot about it. I mean, I didn't forget about it. I sort of occasionally thought, oh yes, I should probably do something about that. And then I realized that I would never actually have time to sit down and write the whole book, or possibly I thought of it as a trilogy. I still think it is a trilogy, but I realized I'd never have time to sit down and write the whole book because I've got other things that I'm doing at the moment. I'll just quickly mention them. I'm writing a Viking series called the Fireborn series about a berserker, and I've got to do one of those, another one of them. I'm on number 5 at the moment. And I've got another project, which is a Mongol thing, which I'm also writing. And so basically I've got those 2 projects, and there was no way I was going to find 6 months or something to write a whole other book. So what I thought I would do, which seemed at the time to be a very clever idea, and I'm now wondering if it is a clever idea at all, or whether it was a rather silly thing to do. I published the first, I think it's 5 or 6 chapters of the King Arthur thing, with a promise that I'd write the rest when I had the time. And then once I'd published it, I realized I couldn't leave everybody hanging. So I then very quickly wrote the second episode. The first one came out in November, and I thought I'd better do the second one so that at least there was something for people to get into before Christmas. So I finished the second one in December, and then lots of people were saying, okay, so when's number 3 coming? So the beginning part of this year, I wrote number 3. And so there are now 3 episodes out, and I've now got to stop because I've got to write another Viking thing, and I've got to finish that by mid-March. And then I'll immediately have to go back to doing the King Arthur thing. That didn't really answer your question, except to say that it kind of happened by accident. And the idea was that I would never actually have the time to sit down and write a full thing. So I could just do these episodes around my, if you like, my real job, my real, well, not real, my other commitments, which I have to do. I've got contracts and various things to do, so I have to do them, hit the deadlines. But often I find that when I'm writing something and I finished a big piece of work, I tend to kind of relax when I finished it for a few weeks, and it takes me a while to kind of sort of come down, and then I have to get back up again, and so there's often kind of a month or sometimes more between projects. And I was thinking, well, that's not very productive. I could probably use that time rather than watching television or going to the pub. I could probably use that time more productively by writing short little things in that time and then self-publishing them. So that's basically what it is. It's a project that began as a sort of experiment and was hanging around for ages. And I thought, well, I might as well just get it out there. And I'm quite pleased with it. I think it's quite good. So basically a project around the other things that I'm trying to do at the same time.
Yeah, the trouble is, Angus, that you've written it too well because it's compelling, you see. So everybody's going to say, oh, we want the next bit.
Yes.
Well, that's very flattering and very kind of you to say so. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, each one doesn't take all that long to write. I can do one in about 10 days, 2 weeks. So I just need 2 weeks clear, and when you're self-publishing it, I mean, I'm not great at self-publishing. I've done 2 Robin Hoods self-published, but it is really easy. I found a guy who does really cheap covers, who's great, and my wife is doing the proofreading, and it's just such a quick process compared with mainstream publishing, which frustrates me enormously how long they take to do things. And I don't understand. I don't understand why. Well, I kind of do, but it's frustrating because they take, years. I've got something a Mongol thing, which I'm trying to get my current publisher to read, and he hasn't been able to read it yet even. And I said, well, when do you think we might be able to publish it? He said, well, we're very keen on it and we like you and all that kind of stuff. He said, well, I think we're thinking about kind of, middle of next year, end of next year. And I'm thinking, I wrote this last year, and then I won't get any money for it for another year after that. It's just kind of like, why should it take 3 years? And the answer is that publishing, I think, is in a terribly bad state. The publishing of our kind of books, the kind of books that we write, is it's not in a good place. They're not making a lot of money, and what they're doing is taking on more and more projects, which means they're overworked, which means they don't have any time to do. I mean, I remember talking to an editor at a party, and he said he was publishing 50 books this year. And I said, hang on a second, there are only 52 weeks in the year, so how can you possibly do that? And then there's meetings and, marketing meetings and all that kind of stuff, and covers. And I mean, that's just, he's barely got time to even read the book, let alone, edit it and have a second read and proofread it and all of that. So it's just kind of, it seems, sorry, this is a very, very long answer, but I've been kind of pushed into self-publishing because I've got stories I want to tell, and the traditional mechanisms for publishing them seem to be failing.
I think you're right. I think it is rather like that, and the length of time is so long. But as you say, I kind of understand why that is, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating.
Why do you think it is, Derek? Why do you think it is?
I agree with you. I think it is the fact that instead of publishing being all traditional publishing, since the advent of self-publishing, the returns for traditional publishers are lower. So as you say, they've
Yeah.
got to cram in more content. They've got to push out more content. There are only a certain number of people they can afford to employ to make that happen. Inevitably, that builds huge delays into every project, doesn't it? I mean, it must do. I can't see how it can't. There's only a limited amount you can humanly do.
Imagine if you had a great novel that it needed a lot of work on,
Yeah,
how could you possibly manage that? You might take, I mean, it takes me a week to read through my own stuff,
yeah, yeah,
on the final read through.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
same here. Well, that's the thing. When you're editing a book, you can't just sit there for 8 hours reading the book and editing it.
No.
You can only do it for an hour, and then you have to go and do something else. Otherwise, you start missing things.
Yeah, yeah. I can't write for 8 hours a day either. I mean, I can do about 4 hours,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
I mean, a morning's work. And then I've got to stop, and I don't work in the afternoons. I come back again in the evening and do some work then. But I'm exhausted after 4 hours. I mean, maybe if I was 20, I might be able to do it.
Yeah.
So the King Arthur thing is kind of writing around
Mm.
the other projects. That's basically, it's filling in the cracks and trying to get some more stories told, in the time that I've got.
The Arthurian stories, I mean, I've read, well, I'm sure we've all read quite a lot of them over the years. And some of them try to eliminate the more magical aspects, but you've kept them in. In fact, you've really made them pretty central. So why was that your take on it?
I don't know. I can't remember. I just had this. I had this idea when when you start writing something, you sometimes don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I definitely don't know where it's going to go with King Arthur because I've only written 3 episodes and I know vaguely what's happening in 4 and 5, which is basically the first novel. But after that, I don't know. But I wrote a prologue about an evil sorceress sacrificing a child to wake up a dragon. I've since changed it, so that isn't the one, and now she doesn't kill the child. The child has another arc.
I did wonder about that. Every time I was reading that little bit, I was thinking, he's not killing the baby. He's not killing the baby.
Well, I thought it was really powerful and really horrible and just really shocking and horrorful. And so I wrote it first, and I thought that's great. And the dragon then wakes up, and I thought, okay, so now what happens, and why is the soothsayer, the woman who it's a woman killing someone else's baby also seemed powerful. Yeah. But in the end, I decided not to do that because it was too awful. That's where it started, and I thought, okay, now so what's the dragon doing, and what's going to happen, and why did she want to wake up the dragon, and so that everything sort of span out from there. But I also realized that actually King Arthur is a little bit too close to Bernard Cornwell's version, and also my own kind of historical fiction ones, which have a hero and a landscape, and he raises armies and he's fighting, and it's against impossible odds, and and I thought it would be quite nice for a change to have some supernatural elements, and also because you've already got Merlin in there and Nimue, who is actually the soothsayer. It seemed like these two could be opposed to each other as they are in the Arthurian legends, and therefore the woman who wakes the dragon is Nimue, and Merlin is opposing her, and they're fighting this supernatural battle, a sort of a meta battle above the stuff that's going on in the ordinary push of spearmen and Arthur fighting on cavalry and him doing his stuff down there. So it seemed quite interesting to have a supernatural battle going on above, but also contingent with the sort of secular battle, the prosaic land-based battle of Arthur, shield walls and cavalry charges and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little about your version of Arthur, the man rather than the legend?
Yes, I think I kind of wanted him to be, I mean, he's a young man, he's brave, obviously, but he's also got this idea of compromise. I know compromise is not a very sexy thing, but it's actually, I think, key to practically everything in life, particularly in politics, in diplomacy, in ruling, any entity. in families, in everything. And so I kind of think of him as a compromiser when everybody else is being extreme and saying, no, 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 we've got to kill them or we've got to destroy them or whatever. I think his central thing is that he's actually, you've got to be strong and you've got to be firm, but actually coming to an accommodation and compromising and basically forming unity out of chaos. That's what he's trying to do. That he's grown up in a world of chaos where every kingdom is fighting against another kingdom. All the British kingdoms, you've got Reged and Dumnonia and Cerno and Gwent and all these little petty kingdoms endlessly fighting each other. And they're fighting each other at the same time as and then enemies coming in from the east, the Saxons and the Jutes and the Angles. And because they're so divided, they don't notice these people coming in, and it's actually their downfall. So Arthur is struggling to unify the British kingdoms and get them to stand together to resist the invader. Now, we know historically, even though this isn't historical fiction, they didn't win.
Spoiler alert.
We know what happened. And this is a fantasy novel, so I mean, I could make them win, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And the idea is that basically he's trying to make England. He's a bit like King Alfred later on. He's trying to unite people against an invader. It's very influenced by that, actually. And even that is a false narrative, because the real enemy is not the Saxons, and it's not the invaders, and it's not the warring tribes of Britain. It's actually the dragon. So back to your previous question, what's the point of the dragon? Why are you including a dragon in all this? The dragon is basically the devil and is the epitome of evil. He's called Cithral, which is Welsh for devil. So basically, my pronunciation of the Welsh is going to be dreadful because I don't speak Welsh and I've got all this stuff from Wikipedia, or in the internet. But basically, the idea is that this is a non-human sentient entity that has a completely different agenda to mankind, and in fact sees mankind very much as we might look upon cattle or sheep or pigs, to be preyed upon and herded and farmed and eaten.
Yeah, I read the eaten bit.
Yes, yes, read that bit. Yeah.
Yes, have you got to that? You read that bit? Yeah, it's a bit disgusting, isn't it? There's this poor girl who gets eaten by the dragon. But no, but the dragon's like just eats a lot, and he's not the only dragon. There's lots of them. The idea is that they are this race of, they're kind of aliens actually, because they come from, there's a meteor that, I mean, this is all backstory, but there's a meteor that comes down. And when the world was very young and fertile, was so fertile, it managed to turn this meteor into a dragon, or perhaps the dragon was buried in the meteor. It's not clear, but the dragon comes from elsewhere. But it manages through magic to breed with human beings and create a race called Wormkind, because the series title is Wormkind Chronicles, and Wormkind, which took me ages to get to, because all the other ones, Dragonkind, all the others have been taken and used. Nobody had Wormkind, so I latched onto that one. And the idea is that there's this like race of dragonish type people with a father of dragons who's the great Cithral, the embodiment of evil, who basically want to colonize the whole of the earth and farm the people, and that's what Merlin is fighting against, and Arthur eventually will fight against them too. So that's basically where we're going with that one.
I was interested to see you've got quite a few names in there from, if you like, the Arthurian sort of 15th century Arthurian stories, Gawain, Galahad, and so on. Are you going to keep running through those? Are you going to have a Lancelot and a Guinevere, or do you, judging from what you said earlier, you may not know that yet?
Yeah, I want to have Lancelot. I want to have Lancelot and Guinevere because that's such a great love triangle. It's fantastic. I mean, and it's part of the whole Arthurian appeal. I mean, I think you can't really have Arthur without Guinevere and Lancelot, because it's the classic love triangle of the aging king and the beautiful girl
Mm.
and the love affair that nobody can resist it, and it destroys them all. And I think that's rather elegant and beautiful,
Yeah.
and it's the reason why
Yeah.
Mort Arthur and all of it is basically the
Mm.
reason why Arthurian legends exist, because this is such a powerful trilogy.
Yeah.
It's the same story that you see in Troy as well.
Yes.
It's Menelaus and Paris and Helen. You know, it's that same love triangle. I wonder if that's where the Arthurian people got it from. It's this idea of the old king and the young beautiful thing, and she goes off with a handsome bloke, and it destroys the world. It's like it's something. There's another one as well which I can't bring to mind, but there's another example of this
Mm.
same trope happening again and again. But it's a really interesting one, and everybody can relate to it, because if you're the old king, you want a beautiful woman, but she doesn't want you, and she's going off with a
Yes.
handsome guy, and you know, it's just like we can all
Mm.
relate to it, which makes it so powerful. And so definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's not going to happen until Arthur's still a young man
Mm.
in the first novel. He's like 20 or something, and he's basically forming his close gang of round table. They're not called knights, they're warriors of the round table, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. Yeah.
Because they didn't have knights in those days, but they're basically knights of the round table, and they're all going to have a little bit of story, some of them less than others. I mean, I don't know what to do with Caradoc, for example. I've no idea what, but it's going to evolve. I've got a funny one. I've got Bagdemagus, who's one of the Arthurian people, and he's going to be like the comedy element. He's kind of
Yeah.
fat and greedy and funny and irreverent. And I've got Agravain, who's kind of like a lieutenant, and Gawain. Galahad is in there too. Galahad's kind of young and handsome and incredibly sort of honest, and you know, I mean, they're all going to have their various traits, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but I can't quite remember what Hyle's going to do, and I don't remember what Eric's going to do. So I'll just sort of see how they go. Some of them are going to get killed as well. I mean, I've got to have some fodder, because you know, they can't all go through all the battles without getting killed. But I'm going to try and give them maximum emotional impact when they die.
It's the ones books that get me are the ones where somebody comes in, they introduce a character who's not in the original story, especially with the King Arthur legend, and you're like,
Yeah.
There's this character named Ben or something, and it's like, oh, you're so dead.
Well, we all do that, I think, don't we, in our books?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the people who wear red uniforms in Star Trek, you know, and they go on a mission, like, you know, they're gone, they're toast, you know. No, I mean, I think there's not going to be very many standing by the end of book 3, I would think. You know, there's around 12 of them now. I think there's 12.
Yes.
And I wouldn't expect many of them to live all the way through till the end of book 3. They might all get killed in a massive conflagration. I've got 5 enemy knights as well, who are the bodyguards of the soothsayer or Nimue, and they've all got like facial tattoos of various different animals. So there's the leopard and the boar and the wolf, fox and the snake, I think. I don't know quite what I'm going to do with them, but I thought that'd be quite interesting to have them with their own personality. So I'm going to try and have them as not just faceless henchmen, but actual characters with story arcs and things to do. And one of them's going to be a coward, and one of them's going to be kind of like particularly nasty, and they all going to interact with. I mean, the thing is, it might be more than 3 books. That's the problem, is I don't quite know. It's also the beauty of this, because I've got, you know, you were saying when's the next one coming out, and I've just published episode 3, and I've got to write something else. So the next one won't be for about 6-7 weeks, at least, maybe 2 months. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to wrap up the story, because you don't get to go back and trim, because you've published it. It's out there. So I can't go back and take out a few chapters and make it a more manageable size. I've got to just keep going forward. And the other thing I was thinking is I haven't really decided if I'm actually going to cut it up into novels. I might just keep on going, like a roman fleuve, you know, the ones that just keep on going.
Yeah.
Because I quite like The Broken Kingdom as a title, and I don't want to have to think of another one. And also, is there a particular end point? I mean, I might have to chop them up and publish them as actual paper books, because some people are complaining that they can't read them on paper. But I could do that sort of. I suppose I could do that before finishing the whole thing. If I was going to go for, you know, if I was just, I mean, I figure 15 episodes will probably do it, but it could be 20. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the beauty of it is, because you're publishing in episodes. If you suddenly find by halfway through episode 4 that 5 episodes isn't going to do it, you can always put a 6th one on the end and go, surprise.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's the nice. It's a nice flexibility to be able to have. When I write a novel, normally there's a big battle at the end, and everybody gets killed, and the things are resolved, and the hero gets the girl or whatever, and it's a definite ending. But there isn't really any particular need to do that in this story.
Yeah.
Because the ending comes when the dragon's defeated, and that's 15, 20 episodes away. So I could just keep on going. Though, there is a clamor for people saying, well, I don't read ebooks. And some guy said to me, I want you to do it in hardback, and otherwise I won't ever read any of your books again. And I kind of had to restrain myself from being very rude.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm writing this story. If you don't read it, it's not going to break my heart, I lose £1 or something, but we'll see how we go. I mean, it would be probably sensible to put out a paperback version after 5 or 6 episodes, and
yeah, I guess if you come to a kind of natural sort of a mini conclusion, as it were, and then you could at that point publish that on paperback.
Yeah.
But it does give you a lot of freedom. I can see that. There's pluses and minuses, aren't there? I mean, you as you say, you can't go back and change something, but you have got the freedom to work around things as you go.
Yeah.
I guess as long as you don't paint yourself into a corner.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is fantasy, so I could probably do something,
Yes.
No, I am. I mean, I kind of roughly know. I know that the first bit is about uniting Britain, and the second bit is about driving off the Saxon, and the third bit's about uniting the Britons and the Saxons to fight the dragon. So I kind of know, there's a sort of overarching structure.
Yeah.
But I've got to get in Guinevere and Lancelot at some point, and I don't know how I'm going to do that. Probably in about 3 or 4 episodes time. And I've got Tristan and Isolde, which I want to get in.
Yes, I noticed that. I noticed them popping up.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do something with them, but I can't quite work out how that works. I think quite soon, because Tristan's such a nice thing, and Isolde's this sort of manic pixie dream girl kind of perfect woman, but without much character. And I've got to do something with her. I mean, we've got plenty of women of strong character. I mean, you've got Nimue, who's evil, and you've got Morgan, who is in love with Arthur, and there's some catastrophe happening there.
Yes.
And has some very lethal gastric reflux.
Yes. I don't know where that came from.
No.
but it seems like a good weapon for her to have, to be able to, to just like spit at people and they dissolve. But you've got Igraine. I don't know what to do with her. That's Arthur's mother, who's quite a brave woman, gets horribly mistreated all the time. I should probably just have some normal women, who don't want monsters and who aren't being mistreated all the time. It's quite difficult to.
Well, it is. I mean, I had a lot of criticism in my Wars of the Roses stuff about, why are all the women basically getting attacked all the time? And you do, I think, have to pull back from that at times. Because if you're not careful, whilst you know that it happened, it didn't sort of happen probably every day. So you have to sort of leaven it a bit, I think.
Yeah.
But in fantasy, of course, you can do whatever you like.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I keep forgetting it's fantasy because it's kind of like, I don't know, it's in this in-between zone.
It's sort of historical fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, is that what it's called? I don't know what the genre is. Historical fantasy? Yeah, no. I don't know. I mean, I kind of was almost there with Robin Hood, because there was the Holy Grail and it was kind of slightly magical and stuff.
Yeah.
And also Robin Hood didn't exist, so he's not historical, and King Arthur.
Oh, we're going to have an argument.
All right, okay. And also, with the Fireborn Viking ones, I mean, he when he turns into a berserker, he's kind of like superhumanly strong. Yeah. Which is also, again, like just verging on the fantasy. Actually, I wrote the first Fireborn as a fantasy novel, where he was going to have proper supernatural skills. And my publisher said they didn't want a fantasy novel. They just wanted historical fiction. So I just went and cut out some of the more extreme bits and gave it back to them. But, so I've been sort of hovering around the edges of fantasy for ages. I wrote one fantasy novel called Gates of Stone, and I enjoyed that. But you've got to kind of keep it. I don't like fantasy books where the magic is unbounded. I think there have to be some kind of constraints, and I think it has to hurt the person who wields the magic or cost them something when they wield it. Otherwise, it's like free power.
Absolutely.
So my soothsayer has to burn herself. She puts her hand into the flames in order to get the magical sight that she has, and it's the pain, and then she can see visions when she gets the pain of her burnt fingers. But I always think that magic should come at a price.
What I did quite like, as far as you've written, is it is a kind of in-between world, but this is a ridiculous thing to have struck me. But basically, I was interested when you mentioned sheep in the field. And I thought, well, yes, because life goes on. There may be battles here and there, but always life goes on because people have to eat.
Yeah.
And, somebody has to be farming and so on. And there is no time when that's not happened. Otherwise, we'd all have died centuries ago.
Yes.
So it was quite nice that you put that in to kind of just a small point to acknowledge that there was a living world there in amongst the fantasy and the violence and so on.
Yes. Well, I mean, as you say, if it wasn't there, I always try and think about the economy in the books that I'm writing and how people would have traded and how they would have fed themselves and equipped themselves and built their houses and what they'd use to thatch the house. So if they've got barley thatch, they've got to have barley fields. That means they've got to have large areas set aside for the plow, and if they're going to use if they're going to make wooden timbers, they need forests and all that sort of stuff that you need as background. I obsess a little bit about that too much, really.
I don't know. I mean, Sharon and I have talked about this with other people before about in the past, the close connection between the environment and people's survival.
Yeah.
And it's part of that, isn't it, really?
I also try and balance everybody's meals so that it's a mixture. So they are eating some green vegetables and some fruit, and not just meat all the time.
That's the father in you, Angus.
Though I in the Mongol thing, I've realised that you can actually live on just meat and milk, because the Mongols did, and a very tiny amount of rice or millet. But I kind of think quite a lot about what people are going to be eating and. Well, where do they get the apples? Well, there must be orchards. Where are they going to get the honey to make the mead? Well, they must have skeps, which they're using to, farm bees, unless it's wild bees, in which case, how on earth do they've got, I've got a guy called the Honeyman in one of my books who goes out and gets wild honey, and that's his job. But I do think about the economy and the way that it all fits together quite a lot. Though perhaps I should do more of that. I mean,
but it's part of the world building, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
The creation of the world you're writing about.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't have an economy, then nobody could fight, because nobody's got any money to buy the swords, the shield.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things I think is quite interesting about Merlin in my King Arthur is that he's very rich. And I think that came from a comment from one of the Marvel movies that my son, who's 11, watches all the time. There was a whole bunch of like superheroes getting together, and one's got this power, he can fly, the other guy can go invisible or whatever. And someone says to Batman, "So what's your superpower?" And Batman says, "Superpower? I'm rich. I guess that's a kind of superpower, isn't it?" So I thought it'd be quite fun to have Merlin being really rich, which means that he has power above and beyond whatever magical power he possesses.
Also makes him independent, doesn't it? Because if he's independently wealthy, he doesn't need
to join any particular
support
faction
or protection of any one king.
He
can pick and choose who he supports.
Well, he's also not really concerned about people who, I mean, on the sort of ordinary prosaic level, he doesn't really care who gets murdered and who's high king, what goes on. He likes Arthur, but he's not, it's like he just wants to destroy the dragon, so that's it.
Yes, I quite like I think there was a bit where Morgan says to him that Arthur's in danger, and he sort of says, "Yeah, okay, fair enough, sort of
Yeah.
thing. Never mind. Move on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what are you going to do about it? He's like,
Yes,
miles away.
quite.
It was probably in the past, so it's
Yeah.
resolved now either way.
He's quite a callous guy.
Mm.
But the other thing about his magical powers, it's largely based on technology as well. He's very much Batman, actually. He makes high quality steel. He's got lots of forges based in the Forest of Dean, which was a big ironworking site in the 5th century and perhaps later as well, because they had forests and iron ore deposits. And so they would make a lot of iron there. And I thought if that's where Siluria, where Merlin lives, it would make sense to have him making iron. And what if he made really excellent steel that was stronger than everybody else's iron? So all the other warriors tend to use iron, and he's using high quality steel, which has got carbon in it, probably from blood or from charcoal. So there's a kind of like slightly kind of techie element of him producing the best steel. And Arthur's got this steel coat, which I don't know if you've read the last one, but he wears this shiny steel coat made of little overlapping scales. So that means it's very difficult to kill him, which also enhances his power. And he's got Excalibur, which is also another very lovely bit of steel. So it's kind of there's elements of industrial revolution in there into the mix.
But what I liked about that was that Merlin says to him, yes, but you've got to clean it with this every day. So here you are, you've got this wonderful thing. And in order to keep it wonderful, you're going to have to do some work.
Yes, yeah, that's good. Yeah. Not very magical.
No, exactly, yeah.
Speaking of Excalibur, the story is your own. How do you decide which parts of the legend to incorporate and which to leave out?
Oh, you make it sound as if I've got this all worked out. And I very much haven't. I mean, I just pick the bits I like. I like Tristan and Isolde. That's a nice tragic story. I like Lancelot and Guinevere. Excalibur, the sword, is very iconic and powerful, and I thought he's got to have Excalibur, and it's got to be important. So Excalibur is made from a meteor of the same thing that the dragon is made from. So you can probably guess where that's going. So I wanted that. I wanted Arthur to be a reasonable man, but he's also got a very bad temper. So he can have fits of absolutely appalling temper. We haven't really had that yet, but he's.
No, we've seen reference. He's mentioned his temper, and his mum mentions his temper, but we haven't actually seen it yet. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's going to lose it. He's going to go a little bit berserk. And then he's going to feel really bad. He's going to fuck things up as well because of his temper. So there's a flaw in there as well. But most of the time, he's a kind of reasonable compromise, quite clever, quite cunning organizer, manager, basically, sort of person, but with a terrible temper. So which bit do I include? I think the bits. I think the bits that stick in your memory. A friend of mine, when I was a journalist for a long time, and a friend of mine used to say, when you're applying through your notes of an interview, she said to me, look, don't do that. Memory is the best editor. I don't know if you've heard that expression. The things that you remember of that interview, of the person that you were interviewing, those are the ones that are important and will resonate with the reader. And I think it's the same with the Arthurian legends. The bits that I remember that have stuck in my memory are the ones I'm going to use, rather than ploughing through them all again. I mean, I've read Mort Darth, and I've read Bernard Cornwell and several other little Arthurian things, and Giles Christian's done a very good one as well. But the bits that you remember, you're going to use because your memory is sieving out the ones that are important to retain. So that's pretty much how I decide, by the bits that I remember.
Yeah.
Also expediency. If I know that I need, a big dramatic moment here, then I'll pull something from the legends and use it. But there isn't really an overall plan. I'm groping in the dark and just finding a couple of weeks to write another episode and then getting back to doing the other stuff.
But you're enjoying it.
Yes, I am actually. Yeah, more than I thought. That's the other thing that's quite nice, is it's about 5 or 6 chapters, which is a manageable chunk of work. And you can write it quite fast and then go over it and make it better and then publish it, and then it's gone. So it's kind of like it's quite a sort of satisfying lump of work to deal with. Whereas when you've got a whole book, you sometimes kind of like
Mm.
sigh when you open up. When I'm writing my normal novels and they're like 100,000 words long or 350 pages or something, you mustn't open at the top, because if you then start reading, you'll never get down to the bit that you were working on yesterday, because
Mm,
you'll be spotting all sorts of flaws and infelicities and spelling mistakes and things where, oh God,
yeah.
that's not very good, and you'll start editing it and you've got to jump straight to the bit. But when you've only
Mm,
dealing with 5 chapters or 6 chapters, it's much easier just to kind of digest it. You can sort of
yeah.
masticate it and swallow it and digest it much more easily than you can a whole novel.
Mm.
Mm. And I get what you're saying about when you're starting a novel, you're sort of at the bottom of the cliff face, and it's all uphill. It's all hard work.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a shorter project in view, then you can think beyond it.
Yeah. Someone asked me the other day, do you like writing? Do you enjoy writing? And I had to pause for a little bit. And then I realized that the truth is I like having written.
Mm.
Yes.
You know?
I totally understand that. It's either finishing a project or just getting to the end of the day and going,
Yeah.
oh, I've done 2,500 words. I can live with that.
Yes, and yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And you think, yeah, okay, I've done something, I've done a good thing. Or when you've got a little chunk and you've published it, you think, okay, great, that was a piece of work. I've done it, I've published it, it's out there, it's gone. And I like having written rather than the actual process where you're sitting there and thinking, God, this is terrible. How can I improve it? And then doubting
Yeah.
yourself and going, oh God, I can't do this, and all that stuff that I'm sure all writers feel, or perhaps it's just me.
No, I don't think those doubts go
Yeah,
away,
no,
really. How many
no
books
matter,
you've written?
no. So having written is great, because you can hold something up and say, yeah, I did this,
Yeah.
and this one here, and that story, and I created these people, and they had lives, and they
Mm.
lived, and they died, and that's nice.
I must say, that's what keeps me going. The thought of the book, the number of times I've just thought, especially the one I'm writing at the minute, is just when I hold it in my hand, it will have been
Yeah.
worth it.
Yes. Yeah. Or having a shelf full of them and going, oh yes, I see, yeah, see that one, and that one. I remember
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Forgotten about that
Yeah.
one. Or, it's a very good feeling.
I've certainly enjoyed reading them.
I'm very glad. Thank you.
And to be honest, I'll be perfectly honest with you, Angus. I didn't know whether I would because you come across so many things on King Arthur in various guises, and because I've written a series on post-Roman Britain about Ambrosius, who is the kind of one of the sort of guys who's supposed to be the Arthur, if you
Oh
like.
yes.
Because of all that, and I've done lots of sort of historical research as far as one can, I was a bit worried when I started reading it. But I have to say, I think you've done a fabulous job of incorporating what Britain might have been like with the sort of fantasy elements and the Arthurian legend, because you've kind of got three things in there. You've got the Arthurian legend, Britain in that period that you've chosen,
Yeah.
and the fantasy. But it works for me anyway.
It works for me as well.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say so. I just want to say on this recording, because there's quite a lot of complicated things. I just want to say that the series is called The Wormkind Chronicles. That's probably going to be 3 novels, but let's say it's going to be 3 novels. And the first novel is called The Broken Kingdom, and I've no idea what the next 2 are going to be called. And the first episode is called Arthur's Bane, and the second episode is Arthur's Escape, and the third one, Arthur's Revenge, and the fourth episode, probably coming in March, will be, I think, called Arthur's Folly. But so you get the theme. It's Arthur's something, and I'll tell you what number it is. So the people who are looking for it, read them in order. Probably best to start at 1, and they're only 99p, and they're just as ebooks at the moment, and they very likely will be paperbacks later on this year probably in the sort of late summer, when I've finished writing.
I do like the fact that not every episode ends on a total cliffhanger as well.
That's probably a mistake.
Episode 3, we've got a good ending to episode 3. Also, it carries on.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to this woman who works in television, and she said, no, you've got to have a cliffhanger at the end of every episode to make them buy the next one. And I thought, well, Do I? I mean, perhaps to be more sensible, but it's also quite nice to finish an episode. So finishing episode 3, where there's a resolution of sorts, I kind of knew that I was going to have to make people wait for a month and a half for the next one. So it seemed only fair to give them some sort of resolution, and hopefully they'll pick up again next time around.
But of course, you've got several strands to the story
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
whilst there might be a resolution for one character, there isn't necessarily for another one. So you've got certain things are still hanging, even though, you know, one part is partially resolved. So I think that's good.
Yeah, we know Arthur's on the up at the minute. He's comfortable and happy, but Igraine in Caer Camlan, we don't know what's happening in Caer Camlan at the minute. So
No, I don't know what's happening either. Just one other thing to say. Caer Camlan is South Cadbury.
Yes.
I don't know if everyone knew that, but it's an incredible place. I went there a few years ago on the way to Cornwall, and I stopped there and had lunch and walked around the castle. I think I stayed the night actually. And it's a brilliant kind of lozenge-shaped thing that sits on the plain. And when you're there, you can see Glastonbury Tor in the distance on a clear day, which is, I suppose, 30 miles away. And it's kind of on the main it's just off the A303. So it's like a really good central position for Camelot. So that's why I picked it. But it's quite nice having been there. I can imagine, you know, where things are going to be happening.
Which reminds me, where Kithral is he in Edinburgh?
Yes.
I thought so when I was reading it. I'm there thinking, is he on Arthur's seat or Nimue? Thinking this is going to be confusing if he sat on Arthur's seat.
No, because Arthur's seat was originally called Archer's seat.
Yes.
And I was looking at Arthur's seat. I was wondering if I could. I was thinking I was looking at all sorts of Arthurian things, and then I thought this is called Archer's seat, and it was then changed to Arthur's seat, and it is an extinct volcano. And if you look at the topography of Edinburgh, there's the bit where the castle is, then there's Arthur's seat, and in the valley below is where Edinburgh is. And then you've got the north, you've got the sea. So basically, it is Edinburgh, and the Kithral is sitting on Arthur's seat, which was in this fantasy still occasionally volcanic, and the soothsayers on Edinburgh Castle on that incredible rock, and down in the valley as well. The horrible stuff goes on with the feeding of the dragons and poor folk of Edinburgh.
Oh, good. I'm glad I worked that out.
Yes.
So Edinburgh really comes from the phrase Eatonborough.
Yes, very good. The Eton. Actually, I might put that in.
Oh,
be a good little joke.
Well, thank you so much, Angus. It's been absolutely fabulous talking to you and finding out the history behind the writing of the books. I think it is a fabulous series. I can't believe I've got to wait until March for episode 4.
Sorry, I've got to write another one in between now and then. It's not that I'm not doing nothing. I've got to write practically a whole novel.
I know, you'll be forgiven. It's just it is one of those books that, you know, there's so many books out there, and a lot of the time you just enjoy reading a book. There's only a few at a time that you get to the point where you can't wait to read it.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
It's
indeed.
like, I want to go to bed so I can read half an hour of Angus Donald.
Well, it'll come very soon, I promise. And then the next one will be just a month after that, because I've got Blood of the Bear is the 5th Viking one, and I've got to deliver that by mid-March. Then I'm going to write that one, say end of March, and then I'll have some edits on Blood of the Bear, and then I'm going to write another one in sort of April.
And to be fair, I'm looking forward to the next episode of Bjarki as well in Fireboard series. I've been enjoying those.
Okay, thanks very much for having me, and I'll hope to see you again soon. And will you give me a shout when this is coming out, and I can...
Oh yes, definitely, yeah.
Thank you very much, Angus. A pleasure as always.
Yeah, great to talk to you.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Derek.
Bye-bye.
See you soon, I hope.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you very much to Angus. Do join us next time when we'll be talking to SD Sykes about her series of books on the Black Death. I've been Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks, and we'll see you again soon.